Thank you all so much for being here. Thank you for gathering with us here at your City Hall, your City Hall complex. This belongs to all of the people of our community, and I'm glad that the people are comfortable and coming here and being a part of this remembrance. I won't call it a celebration, but certainly a remembrance and an opportunity to strengthen our resolve as a people to be together in community. So with that said, we have many folks with us this morning, some of whom I first met in the wake of 9/11 and the events that happened in the years following that. Many things have changed about our community and about our world, but in many ways it's been an opportunity to bring folks closer together who might not have ever known each other. With that in mind, I want to invite Reverend Catherine Dearlove to start us off with an invocation this morning.
Good morning. As we take time this morning to remember the lives lost on September 11th, we also think of all those whose lives were affected by the atrocities of that day. Each of us has different emotions as we reflect on so many lives that were lost and impacted. So I invite you to please pray, reflect, or meditate with me as you're comfortable. God of peace and mercy, of many names and none, on this anniversary of September 11, we again lift up the names of the souls who perished on that fateful day in 2001. Knowing that when we speak their names, their legacy lives on. Remembering the dreadful days after the plane's crash, we are so grateful for those who courageously responded to provide aid and comfort to the afflicted. We pray that your Spirit will continue to heal their hearts as they deal with ongoing pains. We also pray for continuing comfort for the families and friends of those who lost their lives. Help us to mourn alongside them with a constant compassion that is rooted in love. As the shock and horror of that day still remains so vivid for so many, we take a moment today to remember, to lift before God, the God of our understanding, all who were affected by that day. May all receive healing of their hearts and minds. May we remember them, honor them, and lift them up. We will not forget. Amen.
Thank you, Reverend Dearlove. So at this point, we want to invite the Honor Guard from Gainesville Police Department and Gainesville Fire Rescue to present the colors. If you would all please rise for the presentation of colors.
Mark time, march. Left wheel, halt. Mark time, march. Detail, halt. Present, halt. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Order, halt. About face. Prepare to post the colors. Halt. About face. Forward, halt.
So I can't help this morning but think about what life was like 23 years ago, 22 years ago. I was in an office at the University of Florida at WUFT, preparing for a staff meeting that morning. Had just actually walked into a staff meeting late a couple minutes ago. That was my practice. And I'm reminded that most of the people, the enormous majority of the people who are on the University of Florida campus this morning, as well as all the children and young people in our schools across Alachua County this morning, had not been born. Almost no undergraduate students at the University of Florida right now were born prior to September 11, 2001. They have an entirely different frame of reference than most of us. And many of you, who are a lot younger than I am, and some of us are, have an entirely different frame of reference for this day as well. For them, and for some of you, it's always been a remembrance. They've never known, some of you have never really known what it was like for this to be just another day on the calendar. For this to be just the day after September 10th, and we're just getting into the swing of school, and we're in Gainesville praying for a little better weather and a little cooler for the gnats to go away and all that sort of thing. For a large percentage, probably a quarter of the folks who live in our nation and the world, this has always been a day of remembrance. It's always been a day of solemnity. But I'll promise you, most of the folks who are under 21, 22 years old really don't know why it's so solemn. We've been telling them how important and how solemn it is, but they weren't there to experience it. They don't know what it was like to be just going about your work or trying to get to work, whether you were here in Gainesville or in Omaha or in Los Angeles, where they were just getting out of bed, or whether you were on the ground or in an office building in New York City that day. They don't know. We tell them, but there's no visceral understanding of that. There is for a lot of us. I certainly will never forget what it was like to be going about my business that morning. I know that I had some presentations about a WFT pledge drive that I was trying to get across to the rest of the staff and make sure that everyone was ready for this radio pledge drive that was going to start in just a few days. And I had my list of all our volunteers ready, and there was nothing more important than making sure that we were prepared for that the pizzas were ordered, that we had all the snacks ready, that everybody was prepared, because we had money to raise. We had things to do. We had a life to go about. It never occurred to us that there were folks right then who had been making plans for months or perhaps years to do us tremendous harm. We never needed to stop and think about this. Much of the rest of the world has to stop and think about that every day. It was always part of their life. It was never part of our life in the United States. It wasn't something we needed to prepare for. It wasn't anything that we thought we would ever need to do. So I want you to think for a moment about what you were doing. And I know many of you are doing that. You know, when the headlines started to hit to remind you that this was September 11th on the way a couple of days ago, I know you all started thinking about that because, of course, we did. That's when the world changed for a lot of us, when at least the way we react to the world around us became very different. So I want you to put yourself back into that frame of thinking, whether you were on your way to school, whether you were in the office, whether you were just waking up, whatever it was that morning of September 11th, before 8:46, whatever it was that your day was about, I want you to put yourself in that frame of mind, that naivete, if you will, that lack of anxiousness that we all went about our day with. The way that we prepared for things, the way that we knew how the rest of the week was going to roll. We didn't anticipate any of this. In just a minute, I'm going to ask you for a moment of silence, but I want you to set yourself into that frame of mind right now, if you will. Think about where you were, what you were doing, what the sky looked like that morning, wherever you were, whatever you had on the radio or watching on television. And right now, I want you to take a moment of silence, and in about 30 seconds or a minute, we'll come back to this. Put yourself there. So right now, the first tower has been attacked. Most of us don't know that yet. If you weren't in New York, New Jersey, that part of the world, you had no idea. And you probably didn't even if you were there. It was a big noise, I'm sure. But even if you were in Upper Manhattan, if you were across the river, you probably didn't know. If you're in Gainesville, you certainly didn't know yet. But CNN was about to break in to whatever you were watching or listening to. Your regular radio news was about to let you know that something strange had happened. And that maybe someone had made a horrible mistake. A pilot had misinterpreted their flight plan. Something awful had happened. We weren't entirely sure what yet, but you're starting to hear that. It's starting to come across your airwaves. Maybe you just know. Maybe you know that, wow, something's not quite right. I was sitting in Brett Williams' office at Weimer Hall at WFT, just going through our presentation, just the regular, everyday stuff. We're all very intent on what we were doing and how the rest of that week was going to continue to unfold. All our plans and schemes for everything. The best laid plans of mice and men were moving forward just like they ought to do. By now, if you're listening to the radio, you've heard that something odd has happened. We're not sure what yet. In about a minute, CNN's going to break in with video footage. But for now, you're still living your life. Maybe you're in high school, maybe you're walking to class at this point, and the teachers haven't yet figured out that they don't really have a lesson plan for the rest of the day because they don't have any frame of reference for what's happening right now. This is not Pearl Harbor. It's very, very different than that. This is not a national enemy attacking. This is not anything any of us had any kind of preparation for. This is different. And at this point, maybe if you had CNN on the background, as one of my colleagues did that day, you're starting to see images. And you're still wondering, oh my goodness, what could have possibly gone wrong on the flight computer to allow this to happen? You're beginning to process. Even that day, the garbage trucks are still rolling. Buses are still rolling. Everything is working like it should across the world. Every day is still happening. We don't know yet exactly what's happening. We won't know for days what really is at the root of this. There'll be a lot of guessing later today. There'll be a whole lot, amid the tears and the fear and the anger, there'll be a lot of guessing about how this happened, why this happened, who could have had such hate in their heart for us. But right now, things are mostly normal. Most people don't actually have the radio on. Most people aren't sitting in front of CNN. At WFT, public radio, public TV doesn't really do breaking news, so we didn't have the facility for it. At this point, people are calling the station, calling where I was and saying, why aren't you following this thing on CNN? Why aren't you on top of it? It's because it really wasn't, breaking news wasn't what we did. GPD and GFR, you all were, those of you who were employed there already, you were just going about your regular business. But by this point, you knew that things had changed and that something was going on. And I'm intentionally leaving some of these breaks there because that's what the world does, right? We don't always have a script to follow. We thought we did. I used to think that there was always a script to follow. I learned on September 11th, 2001, that things change and that sometimes you've got to take a little break and figure out what's next. because what's next was certainly unthinkable. What we learned that day was entirely unthinkable. As we move through the rest of this morning and through the rest of this day, I want you to consider those last few minutes of peace, of understanding that somebody was in charge and that everything was working as a plan should work, and that we all had business to do that day and every day. And I want you to think about how we were all about to engage, I don't want you to think about the fear and the anger that interrupted into our lives. I want you to think about the days afterward and look forward to the community that erupted, not only in New York, where people were suddenly taking care of strangers, but in Gainesville, where people were getting together. All kinds of different people were coming together to remind each other that this should not be about hate, it should not be about anger, it should be about love, and that love was the only way forward. Because that really happened. If you were in the working world at that point, you saw it, you experienced that coming together of people of different faiths, people who didn't look at all like each other, people who worked very different jobs. We had an outpouring of care and love for each other, and the world offered an outpouring of love and care for the United States of America. So I want you to get yourself in that space where none of that has happened yet, but you know something strange has happened. And while you're thinking about that, I want to introduce my friend, Dr. Saeed Khan, who's going to come share some remembrances of his from that day. And I will tell you that this event is one of the things that helped bring Dr. Khan into my life and many of your lives as well, probably. So please welcome Dr. Saeed Khan.
Thank you very much, Mayor Ward. What I was doing, I was actually getting ready to travel to Europe. And at that time, I was looking on the TV was on as you wait for the flights, and basically everything came to standstill. Some of our friends, we were going for a meeting, they have already gone to Europe. And some of them were at the airport, and some of them, like me, I was at home. So anyway, as Mayor described, the feelings was shock, disbelief. But anyway, today is the day to remember. And as Mayor pointed out, it's not just a question of remembering. It's a question of remembering how the world came together. That was the first time every nook and corner people were in favor of United States and American citizens. Anyway, so from now on, I'm going to go to my reading material here. As I said, I should have started with it, but I think with Mayor, I just got into what. Anyway, Assalamu alaikum. Peace be with you. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. In the name of God, the most merciful and compassionate. O God of love, compassion, and healing, look on us, people of different backgrounds, faiths, and religious traditions, who have gathered here today to remember and pay for the souls of those who lost their lives on September 11, 2001, in attacks on Pentagon, Shanksville, and World Trade Center. We ask you in your goodness to give eternal light and peace to all who died on 9/11, innocent men and women who were simply doing their jobs or just happened to be there, the heroic first responders, the firefighters, the police officers, and the emergency workers. We ask you in your compassion, bring healing to the survivors who continue to suffer from illnesses. We also pray for the families and loved ones of the victims who continue to bear the pain of the loss of their loved ones. Heal the pain of grieving families, comfort their hearts, grant them strength, and bestow upon them your peace and serenity during difficult times. God says in Quran, which is our holy book, Muslim holy book, O mankind, indeed we have created you from a male and a female and made you into peoples and tribes that you may get to know each other. Let us strive to know each other, learn from each other, and turn ignorance with understanding. Let us appreciate our God-given differences and celebrate them. Let us help in bringing people together. Let us become partners and allies and harbingers of peace and harmony, bringing hope to the world. O God of peace, bring your peace to us, peace in the hearts of all men and women, and peace among the nations of the earth. O God, nothing changes without your help. Transform the hate in people with love and understanding. O God, we beseech you to guide us all towards a path of peace, understanding, and unity. Help us to learn from the past and to work towards a future where such tragedies never happen again. Bless our world with harmony, tolerance, and love among all the people. We seek your protection against hatred, violence, and extremism. Let your light shine upon us so we may walk in the ways of peace, justice, and compassion. Amen.
Thank you, Dr. Khan. Now I want to invite Rabbi Kamen.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Although I hadn't planned on exactly saying my memories of that day, your remarks brought me back because I was on a train on my daily commute into New York City and looked out the window of the train, and we saw the smoke from the first plane rising from the tower. And we knew something terrible had happened. Upon arriving at Grand Central Station and entering the subway, it wasn't apparent at that moment how difficult it would be. The train soon stopped, and I found myself standing on a street corner in central Manhattan at the open door of a garbage truck who had the radio on. And we heard, as the towers fell, and we knew that lives had been lost. And standing there, in a crowd of people of all colors, nationalities, races, religions, standing there right on that corner at the open door of that garbage truck, we began to pray, all of us. We held hands, and some cried and some shrieked. And everything was at a standstill except the sirens of wailing ambulances and fire trucks rushing to the scene. It was a horrific moment. My message today, though, is not just of memory, but it is also a message that we still live in a world where there is so much hate. It's a message that we still must dedicate ourselves to finding ways of bringing peace and compassion and understanding in this world. My message is that we must understand that history is complicated and often ugly. And we must share both the beautiful and the ugliness with those who were not born yet, so that they understand the history that they come from, so that they can build a better world. We have to go forward, living in a world where we hold our heads up high, strong and united and accepting, because the terrible things that happened on that day of 9/11 were indiscriminate. They touched all people, all human beings, regardless of their background or who they were or how they lived their lives, everyone was touched. And so we must dedicate ourselves to a better world, to building that better world, to a mission of greater peace. Amen.
Thank you, Rabbi Kamen. So by this time, I've walked out of our staff meeting, and one of my colleagues is saying, go into your office, turn on CNN now. Something horrible's happened. We all know that. I got into my office just in time for the next moment of silence and the reason for that moment of silence. So I'll ask you to bear with me for about another minute here. So by now, New York's finest, New York Police, New York Fire, all over the city, all over the area are heading toward Lower Manhattan. Many are in the buildings, risking their lives to run toward the problem, as our first responders do all over America. With that in mind, I want to invite to the podium our own Gainesville Police Department Chief Lonnie Scott.
Thank you, Mayor, Commissioners, honorable guests. It's my pleasure to represent the Gainesville Police Department at this memorial event. I remember that morning as well, walking past television with the Today Show on and seeing the replay of the plane crashing into the building. Then a second plane striking the building. I was preparing to go to work, and I remember thinking at that time, what about us? Are we ready? And shortly after getting to work, we received the communique that this was a terrorist attack, and we were asked to go out and make sure that our facilities, our infrastructure, were being properly patrolled, secure. And we did that. And we like to point out to both fire and police, any day that we report to work, we know there's a chance that we may not go home. That's why we kiss our loved ones before we walk out the door. That's why we don't carry grievances with us. We forgive our trespassers because we want to be forgiven. We can't afford to settle down into the bickering and let that guide us throughout our workday. We take pride in the fact that we are public servants, and we know that any day that we walk out the door, we may not come home. For 72 law enforcement officers that day, they walked out the door and they didn't come home. For 342 firefighters that day, they walked out the door and did not come home. For 2,977 people who had plans to attend birthday parties, to show love to their loved ones, to go to different events, they did not make it home. Almost 300 people have died since 9/11, 300 firefighters since 9/11 from the dust and the contamination that existed at the site. Over 1,100 people were never identified. 71,000 people have claimed some type of illness or injury, be it mental health and or physical, from that event. The one thing that we, the living, are tasked with is never forgetting. We cannot let small divisions drive us to the point where we want to take someone else's life. And unfortunately, we have a rise in domestic terrorism in this country that we need to be aware of, because it can and more than likely will happen again. will we be ready? Will we be committed to show love to one another as opposed to espousing hate? My officers, when we swear them in, I look at them and their families, and I recognize at that point that they have become part of the Gainesville Police Department family, part of the Gainesville community. And if any of them are lost and or injured, we feel it. So remember those that have sacrificed. Remember those that are prepared to sacrifice, and recognize that 9/11 was one day, and that we face that challenge every day. Thank you.
Thank you, Chief. It's now my pleasure to invite up our former police chief, Tony Jones, who's been with us for a very, very long time doing this sort of thing. And he looks surprised, but that's okay. He's never going to be at a loss for words. So welcome, please, former Chief Tony Jones.
This day, I remember so well. At that time, I was a district commander, and I was going to get my annual evaluation from the police chief. And where I was in the building, we had some televisions, and it came on, and it was surreal. It just did not look real what was going on. And then it finally caught on me that this is real. What is going on is the United States is under attack at that time with these airliners striking in New York. It made a pause for all of us. As the chief indicated, we began to look at our own infrastructure. I can remember when a notice was given by the National Transportation Association, all planes had to come down. You could look up in the sky, you didn't see no planes in the United States of America, because we all were looking at, could we see a repeat somewhere else? And then I saw where they attempted to go into Washington, D.C., and those brave and gallant people caused the plane to crash. A lot of lives, but they saved a lot of lives. I'm glad that we don't forget this day. This day will forever be in our memory, but us working together as a people, as a nation, that's how we can prohibit this from occurring again. So my heart goes out to all the victims, all the firefighters, the first responders, all the police officers, just everybody that has been impacted by this particular event. And I just hope that we never, ever in our lifetime experience something like this again. And it's good that we pass this on to our children. A lot of people that I work with, the youth, they weren't even born during this time. And they need to know about this tragedy so that we will not have a repeat episode in the future. So thank the City of Gainesville. Thank everybody that is gathering here for recognizing this very solemn occasion.
Next, I'll invite up our own Fire Chief, Joe Dixon.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Honorable Mayor, members of the Commission, citizens of Gainesville. I was a young shift officer working at our Special Operations Station in Howard County, Maryland, and when it has been previously stated, we saw footage, but we were like, this can't be real. But then it went from the fact of when we determined that it was real, concerned about what could be next in anticipation and making sure that we were prepared. So 22 years ago today in America, we came under attack. 19 terrorists aboard 4 planes carried out a heinous act in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania. The North Tower fell, or was struck at 08:46 in the morning. The South Tower at 9:03. The Pentagon at 9:37. And the 4th flight headed toward the capital region, but then brave souls that were aboard fought back, causing the hijackers to abort and ultimately crash in rural Pennsylvania, saving countless lives at 10:03. Over the course of 1 hour and 17 minutes, an unprecedented blow was struck on American soil. You may or may not be aware that the CIA quickly determined Al-Qaeda as the source. It was a violent and criminal act by individuals inspired by and or associated with either designated foreign terrorist organizations. It was an act of war. And as a nation, we responded. In the immediate aftermath, thousands of rescuers responded to the various scenes. And as the days passed, communities like Gainesville responded by sending prayers and material resources. Our military responded with Operation Enduring Freedom. Patriots of all races, religions, and socioeconomic status from every state enlisted. We responded in the following years with the determination and courage that continues to serve justice across the globe. On May 2nd, 2011, Osama bin Laden, the founder and first general emir of Al-Qaeda, was killed by U.S. Special Forces. We responded as a nation united and continue to battle against forces that wish to destroy our way of life. We remember because of the memories and connections we all have. I bring regrets from our city manager. She couldn't be here, but she has shared in the past the story of her brother who was working in the Pentagon that day, and the uncertainty, the agony, until it was finally confirmed that he was okay. And we also remember because of the pain and the loss that we all felt. Thousands perished, including the 343 firefighters, 72 law enforcement officers. And know that every year since, hundreds of responders transitioned due to causes attributed to 9/11 exposures. To date, 4,343 per the World Trade Center Health Program. 9/11 was a horrific day, but ultimately a failed mission. The purpose of terrorism is attainment of ideological goals through violence or threats that spread fear. We are instead stronger. We did not and will not surrender to fear. As a responding American, I will never forget. I am proud to serve in a department, in a profession and for a department where compassion and sacrifice is the norm. There were dozens of firefighters that called or sent messages to their families prior to ascending the towers. But knowing their probable fate, they pressed on. It is true, there is no greater love than to lay down the life for others. Stay vigilant, Gainesville. Support your military. Support your first responders. We will always respond. God bless you, and God bless the United States of America.
And I'm going to read this proclamation. I'm going to hand it to you all for your departments. City of Gainesville, Florida, Office of Mayor Harvey Ward proclamation. Whereas, on September 11th, 2001, hijacked airplanes were intentionally crashed into both towers of the World Trade Center in New York City and the Pentagon in Washington, D.C. Another plane was forced to crash into a field in southwestern Pennsylvania near Shanksville after passengers and crew acted heroically on that day to take control of the airliner, sacrificing their lives to save countless others. And whereas 2,977 innocent souls were killed in the heinous attacks, countless first responders from fire departments, law enforcement agencies, and other first responders immediately responded without hesitation to those horrific events. And whereas 22 years later, we, the people of the city of Gainesville, the state of Florida, the United States of America, and the world continue to mourn the tremendous loss of innocent life as a result of the attacks on that fateful day. And whereas 22 years later, we, the people, continue to work to build a more peaceful equitable, and prosperous world, free from racial, religious, sectarian, or tribal hatred. Now, therefore, I, Harvey L. Ward, Jr., by the authority vested in me as mayor of the City of Gainesville, do hereby proclaim September 11th, 2023 as Patriot Day in the City of Gainesville, and invite all our neighbors to join me in observing this day with acts of kindness, generosity, and service to honor the victims of the worst terrorist attack on American soil, so their sacrifices may never be forgotten. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused to be affixed the official seal of the City of Gainesville, Florida, this 6th day of September 2023, Harvey Ward Jr., Mayor. So there are just a few things that I would say to you all as we leave this place this morning. Keep the best of what transpired on that day in your hearts and minds. Don't give any thought to the worst of it. Don't dwell on the hatred and the fear. Dwell on how the world came together to support us, how we all became neighbors all of a sudden. Dwell on that and take that from the People's Square this morning. Take that from the People's House back out into your community today and every day after this. I will leave you with perhaps the best piece of advice I've ever gotten. It's easy to want to respond when challenged negatively. That's our fight or flight response, right? It's what's wired into us. But none of us, not one of us, is required to attend every argument, every fight that we are invited to. We always have the option to walk away. And I will leave you with that. Thank you for being here. Thank all of you for caring enough to be here today.